If you think of Spanish football, probably two clubs come to mind: Real Madrid and Barcelona. In the beginning of last decade, Barcelona were the best team in the entire world. Arguably one of the best teams that we've ever seen. But in recent years, their fall have been pretty hard, racking up a lot of debt. And since Messi's departure, the club has been unable to reach the knockout rounds of the Champions League. But today, we're not going to talk about Barcelona's misery, because we're going back to the good times, to the 2015 Champions League winning squad. Only 3 Barcelona players that played that day are currently still at the club. Last week there were still 4, but after a certain player retired, this number has been reduced to only 3. So before we get into the video, let me know in the comments down below if you can name all the 3 players that are currently still at Barcelona that also played that day in the Champions League final against Juventus. And without further ado, let's get right into the video. In June of 2015, Barcelona played against Juventus for the Champions League trophy. The club ended up winning the game 3-1, subsequently winning the trophy, and a lot of Barcelona fans cherish this moment because it has been the last Champions League trophy that the club won. And in the meantime, Real Madrid added another 4 to their trophy cabinet. Their total Champions League trophy win stands at 14. Absolutely ridiculous. But we're talking about Barcelona today, and in goal they had Marc-André ter Stegen. And we're immediately starting off with a player that is still at Barcelona to this day. In 2014, the goalkeeper arrived at the club for just shy of 10 million euros. But in his first season, he wasn't Barcelona's main goalkeeper yet. Because Claudio Bravo, I don't know if you guys still remember this guy, was Barcelona's first goalkeeper at the time, until he left for Manchester City in 2016. So leaving Barcelona wasn't that great for Claudio Bravo, but for Marc-André ter Stegen, it was pretty good because he finally got the opportunity to become Barcelona's first goalkeeper, and 8 years later he is still that guy. So even though he wasn't the main goalkeeper in La Liga, he played every single game in the Champions League, and it's not that bad actually. Winning the Champions League in your first season with your new club. Like we talked about before, in 2016 Claudio Bravo left, and that was the moment that he finally became Barcelona's first goalkeeper. And he hasn't looked back ever since, because since then he racked up more than 350 appearances for the club, won numerous other titles, and at the age of 30 years old, I don't think that his time in Barcelona is over yet. We're moving on to right back, and this is an iconic player if you ask me, a Brazilian right back that was absolutely ridiculous for Barcelona. Because back then Dani Alves was the right back for Barcelona, and this guy truly was a joy to watch, absolutely had a great connection with Lionel Messi, and if you ask me, probably one of the best right backs that has ever played the game. The player won an incredible 23 trophies during his time at the club, but he only stayed for 1 more season at Barcelona after winning the Champions League, leaving the club on a free to join the club that they actually defeated in the Champions League final in 2015. Because for just 1 season he signed with Juventus, reaching the Champions League final again, but they ended up losing that game to Real Madrid. After his adventure in Italy, he went to Paris, joined fellow countryman Neymar at PSG. He stayed there for 2 seasons, obviously winning 2 league titles. He basically went there to fill his trophy cabinet even further, because you know, if you join PSG, you obviously win the league there. So after staying in Paris, he left Europe, going back to Brazil and Sao Paulo. So everybody thought that this is the end of Dani Alves in Europe, but after a few seasons he made a return to Barcelona. Last season, where he still managed to play 17 times for the club. He managed to grab a goal as well, but he was actually great for Barcelona. At the age of 38, this guy was still a very decent right back for the club. But strangely enough, they didn't renew his contract, so he left the club on a free to Liga MX side Tigres. And if you would ask me, I would have kept Dani Alves. I know that he's old and Barcelona have a lot of problems with salaries and stuff, and they wanted to free up some room, but this guy on the field could still do a job. And I can imagine that in the dressing room, this guy could also be a very important guy. This guy literally won everything, but without a shadow of a doubt, this guy can look back on a great career. Next up is Gerard Piqué. Last week the headlines were all about Gerard Piqué, because after almost 600 appearances for the club, Piqué decided to hang up his boots. It's kind of unusual to do it in the middle of the season, but Piqué had some other businesses going on that didn't really go well with his football career, which might have something to do with the timing of his retirement. I think it's a pretty interesting topic if you ask me. If you want to see a video about that, let me know in the comments down below and I will make it for you guys. The 35-year-old stayed at Barcelona basically until this weekend, but unfortunately in recent years his game time decreased every single season because the now 35-year-old was dealing with a lot of injuries, and unfortunately for him in Barcelona, Piqué just isn't the same player anymore. So after spending nearly a lifetime at Barcelona, last weekend was his last game at home in the Camp Nou in a 2-0 win over Almeria. Without a shadow of a doubt, Piqué will go down as one of the biggest Barcelona legends ever. The next player is probably someone that you would probably forget if you think of Barcelona's great team. But don't get me wrong, Javier Mascherano was probably one of the most important players in that team. Mascherano was actually signed as a defensive midfielder, but he was quickly turned into a center back. The Argentinian player stayed in Barcelona until January 2018, when he completed a lucrative move to Hebei Fortune in China. After that, he joined Estudiantes in his homeland Argentina, but after a year with the club, he announced his retirement in November of 2020. And like I said, even though that this guy wasn't the most shiny player in that team, he was very important and had a great career at the club, and I'm pretty sure that Barcelona wouldn't have been able to win the Champions League without him. Nah, see, now I'm going too far. That is absolutely not true. But okay, still, great player, definitely a little bit underrated if you ask me. But let's just move on to the next player. Because the left back on the day in June 2015 was Jordi Alba. He's still at the club today, but he isn't the starting left back anymore for Barcelona. But back in 2015, Jordi Alba was at the peak of his power. He won the treble that year with Barcelona and he signed a new contract with a 150 million buyout clause, showing that Barcelona had no intentions of getting rid of this guy. Since then, Alba has been the starting right back for Barcelona every single season pretty much, if he wasn't injured of course. But this season, Barcelona is going into a different route, with Balde playing in his position. Jordi Alba is currently rotting away on the bench. Last summer he almost got loaned out to Inter Milan without him actually knowing that Barcelona were negotiating this move, which made him pretty angry. I kind of get that. But the move ended up falling through. He's still at the club, but I don't know if this is the best situation for him. He's barely playing, he's sitting on the bench, and I know he's 33 years old, but I'm positive that this guy could still do a pretty good job for some European top club. It's time to move on to the midfield and we will talk about some absolutely great players with some of the best players to ever play the game. The first one is probably the least recognized of the three, but don't get me wrong, even Rakitic was still an unbelievable player for Barcelona. Rakitic scored the first goal of the game in the 4th minute, and he was also one of the players that signed in 2014, that immediately won the treble in his first season with Barcelona. And it was great for him that he scored in a very important game, but Rakitic made kind of a habit of that. Of course, scoring against Juventus, against Real Madrid as well. He scored against Tottenham too, but I really don't know if we can put that club in the same bracket as Juventus and Real Madrid. So forget the last club, but Rakitic definitely scored in important moments. The Croatian midfielder played over 300 times for the club, but he found himself out of favor under Ronald Koeman. So that's why in 2020 he got sold to Sevilla. He still plays for the club in Seville, who are currently not having a great season, but in that game in 2015 he got subbed out for another player, and I have to be honest, one player that I forgot, but when I saw his name I immediately remembered that this guy played for Barcelona, and to this day I still don't understand why. Because Neymar Jr got subbed on in the last minute for Rakitic, but what was this guy doing at Barcelona? Of course he didn't make any impression in his 1 minute in the Champions League final, but I have to give it to him, when he played for Barcelona he was somewhat decent, but let's be honest, his abilities were nowhere close to what a Barcelona centre back needs. So naturally in 2017 he got sold to Sporting, where he retired 3 years later. The next player is the last player that's still at the club today, because Sergio Busquets was pulling the strings in midfield in 2015. He started pulling the strings in 2008, and to this day he is still going strong for the club. This guy was part of so many great midfields at Barcelona, but he was never the guy that made the headlines, even though he was such an important player. I'm personally a big fan of him. I think that he's truly one of a kind, and if you watch him over the course of an entire game, you will see that this guy does so many brilliant things, and it's clear that this guy embodies the Barcelona DNA. He's one of their homegrown players, and he even became Barcelona's captain after Messi's departure in 2021. Busquets is great at bringing stability in the midfield for Barcelona. That's why this guy is so important for the club, and if everything goes according to plan, this season he will play his 700th game for the club. And we're going from one absolute legend to another, because Andrés Iniesta is as much a Barcelona legend as Sergio Busquets. And there's not much to say about Iniesta, one of the best midfielders to ever play the game. He ended up staying at Barcelona for a couple more seasons after winning the Champions League, departing the club in 2018 to go to Vissel Kobe in Japan. And even though it felt like this guy retired, he's still actually playing for the club. Iniesta was always one of the best players for Barcelona on the pitch, and in the 2015 final, he showed that yet again, becoming the man of the match without even completing the full 90 minutes, because in the 78th minute, he got subbed on for the player who played his last game, is currently the Barcelona manager. And I'm pretty sure that a few of you guys already thought, where is Xavi? We already had Rakitic, Busquets and Iniesta. But yes, Xavi didn't start that game. But like I said, he came on as a substitute for Iniesta, playing his last minutes for Barcelona in the Champions League final. I'm not gonna lie, that's not a bad way to bow out. So after leaving the club, he joined Al Sadd in Qatar, where he stayed for 4 years until his retirement, and subsequently was appointed manager of the team in 2019. He impressed at the club, showing some great football that clearly resembled Barcelona's DNA. So it was no surprise that in November 2021, Xavi was brought back to Barcelona to become the manager of the club. And it's time to move on to the attack, and these three players put a smile on my face. And we're starting off with the best, the finest football player to ever play the game, because Lionel Messi, for me, is the best player to ever play the game. If you want to argue about that, let me know in the comments down below, but I will not agree with it. Messi is truly the best player to ever play the game. Surprisingly enough, Messi didn't score in the Champions League final, but that definitely wasn't a problem, because throughout the season, I'm pretty sure that he made up for it with 58 goals in 57 games. But unfortunately, a year ago, Messi had to depart the club because the club was unable to afford his wages. If it wasn't for the financial trouble that the club is currently in, Messi would have still been a Barcelona player. But the dream is not over for Barcelona fans, because after this season, the club can still sign him on a free, which would be a great way to help the club and end the Barcelona narrative on a high. But if he doesn't, 672 goals in 778 games definitely isn't really a bad record, to be fair. But as we all know, Messi is currently at PSG League in his second season. His first season wasn't that successful, but Messi currently looks like vintage Messi again, as PSG is still trying to win the Champions League title, and with Messi in this form, they have a pretty good chance, I'm not gonna lie. But Messi isn't the only former Barcelona player that is currently tearing it up for PSG, because Neymar right now is in unbelievable form for the club, very similar to his form in the 14-15 season for Barcelona. To this day, that season was his most successful in Europe with 39 goals in 51 games. One of those goals came in the Champions League final, and everybody saw Neymar as the guy to step up when Messi would eventually leave the club. But funny enough, Neymar was the first player of those two to depart Barcelona, because in 2017 he signed for PSG for an insane amount of money, 222 million euros, to step out of Messi's shadow. But so far his time as PSG hasn't really been a success. Well, I don't know, I don't think I can say that. 115 goals in 163 appearances definitely isn't bad. He won a few titles as well. But the reason why he joined the club to step out of Messi's shadow, let's say that didn't really work. But don't get me wrong, Messi is great this season, but Neymar is clearly also stealing the headline. He already has 15 goals in 19 appearances, and Neymar looks absolutely ready for the World Cup. The last player that we're going to talk about is Luis Suarez. In 2015, Suarez was living the dream again in his first season with the club, winning the treble, scoring in the Champions League final, and during his stint at Barcelona, this guy cemented himself as one of the finest strikers they ever had, becoming the third best top scorer for the club of all time, before he got sold to Atletico Madrid in 2020. A decision that immediately backfired, because that season, Atletico Madrid won the league with Suarez becoming the top scorer of the club. And I have to be honest, I didn't understand that decision for Barcelona to sell him. At the time, they didn't have any good other solutions for the attacking position, so to get rid of him was already a strange decision. But to sell him to a rival for the league title, that was just a very dumb thing to do. But after 2 years with Atletico Madrid, he went back to his home country, where he joined his boyhood club Nacional, winning the league title in his first season back with the club. Suarez will soon become a free agent again, and I'm pretty sure that he's still able to kick it in Europe. So any top club in need of a striker, you can definitely look at bringing back Suarez to Europe. But in extra time, Suarez got subbed out for Pedro, who won the Premier League and the FA Cup with Chelsea, before moving to Italy and Roma, and later swapping Roma for Lazio, where he became one of only 3 players to score for both Roma clubs. So guys, that's the video done. Let me know in the comments down below, was this Barcelona's best ever team? As always, be sure to like the video, subscribe if you're new to the channel, click my videos on the end screen right now, and I'll see you on the next video. Peace.